The breeze is really lovely here on the beach, except for these sandflies. Anyway, to continue with where I left off, so I'd like to talk to you about the rest of what you need to know, which is the Malaysian legal system and the court structure or court systems. Yeah? Might seem dry, but maybe some of you might find it interesting. So let's just have a look. It's really to understand how a country is built up in this way. So for the system, legal system, you're going to look at sources of law and the organs of the government related to the law. Actually, this one also refers to organs of the government or organs of what makes up countries' running or leadership. So first of all, let's see, we have this idea of sources of law. So we have one which is what we call the written law. And written law basically is federal constitution, legislation enacted by parliament, and subsidiary legislation, which are rules and regulations and bylaws. So, of course, you can guess what the other is, right? Unwritten law, yeah. Okay, so what is the difference? So, I mean, actually both will turn up to be on paper, but here what they mean is something that specifically is spelled out in a written document already as a guide, which judges, etc., refer to, judges and lawyers of the legal system, police, etc., all various authorities refer to. So the idea is that some of it already is written, but some of it is in process, and it keeps coming up, or it's based on some interpretations of what may have happened. So let's take one by one in a way. Yeah? So federal constitution, and that's something we touch on following week more in detail. So that's what they call an overarching principles and laws that all other laws are made based on it. So it gives often the things that a country should or a country holds important, and that forms guiding principle for the writing of other laws. Yeah? Legislation enacted by parliament. So what's that? Legislation is another word for laws. Huh? So laws that are written and passed by parliament. So just to pause here for a moment, parliament are the ones who make laws. So members of parliament together forming the parliament are the ones who create and make the law. That means they pass the laws that may be written by somebody who wants it. Subsidiary legislation, so these are rules and regulation bylaws. So again, when you do some of the reading, especially the one by Farid Schweib, Media Law in Malaysia, you will see how a country has these big laws, what applies to the whole country, and there are the states, and the states or different bodies or different ministries may have some other things that they want to put as sub-laws based on those larger laws. So those are the bylaws. Yeah? And then unwritten law, principles of English law, that means a way that, you know, we have this whole carryover from the British colonial period, which we learned from. So it's from there that our current law is based. Yeah. So when they say principles of English law, some of the ways in which the British or the English legal system have looked at certain issues. Anyway, we will look at those. Decisions of superior courts. What's this? So the unwritten laws here is, say, based on certain law that has come up, the laws are written in such a way that it needs further interpretation. So a certain case issue comes up, and the judges need to see, oh, does it apply here or it doesn't? So few different judges may take the same and may decide differently. So what happens is when the High Court or a superior court actually decides on a particular way of interpreting the legislation, the law, this then becomes new law. So the next time a certain law comes up from here, let's just say copyright law. Okay, that's easy enough to remember. So copyright law, there are certain what they call clauses, right? In it. So if one incident or issue comes up, how the judge interprets and applies the copyright law from here, and the decision he makes is what will become binding. So next time somebody wants to decide, oh, how do we interpret this aspect of copyright law? They will have to see a decision of a superior judge, a judge who had done previously. So this is actually the part where you will be doing your first assignment, which is case laws. So you look at the laws and you see, okay, copyright law, a copyright act, blah, blah, blah section. How did the judge decide on it? Now this then becomes the rule by which, or the standard by which the next person deciding on the same kind of incidents will decide. So this is considered decisions of superior courts. So superior courts, you will see that some courts are higher, some courts, so it's a whole hierarchy. So the top one will be binding on the next level. So if this court makes a decision, this lower courts have to follow. And that's how it works. Customs accepted as laws by courts. So you also see there are customary laws. That means from practices of the usually indigenous or native peoples of a certain country or place, they decide or they influence the way that law can be applied. Yeah? Okay, so this are what we talk about as the organs of government. So there are three main organs. People will say the three parts of government or the whole country. So there's the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Try and get the pronunciations proper so that we sound intelligent. Legislature, executive, judiciary. Okay, a principle that democratic countries follow is separation of powers. That means, what basically it means is that this shouldn't influence this to make their decisions, and this shouldn't influence this to make their decisions, and vice versa. Yeah? So that each can then follow or be independent and serve as check and balance for each other also. We'll talk a bit more. So legislature basically is the people who make the laws. Do you remember who they are? I mentioned them earlier. So who passes laws? Parliament does. So the legislature is the parliament. Then there's the executive. Who's the executive? These are the members of the parliament who make up the ruling government, and they are the ones who begin and form what you call ministers of the cabinet, etc. That's the executive. Then there's the judiciary. Judiciary is entirely separate also, which at the head will be what we call the Chief Justice, and then under him are the judges. So these judges and the Chief Justice of the different courts form the judiciary of all levels of courts. Yeah? So legislature, the most important institution because it is part of the democratic system, as I mentioned. We have what is called a bicameral legislature consisting of the, what? Can you recall or do you know? So there are two. One is the Dewan Negara or upper house, and the other is Dewan Rakyat or the lower house. So the parallel to the British system is this one, Dewan Negara, upper house, are the House of Lords. So these people are just usually appointed by the king or the queen in UK upon the kind of recommendation by people from the states. And this one are those who are elected. When you come to general elections, these are the ones elected. So this is considered lower house, or in the British system, they call it House of Commons. It sounds as if they are less important, but actually these are the people who are running most of it because they are the ones who start and pass laws, though the laws, those who pass the laws and who this house also has to agree on. But nevertheless, most of the discussions, most of the power is here. Okay, so they are all given the power of making laws. That means all the acts that we see came up from them. And this is what we call parliament in action. So the parliament, again, just to say it again, has two houses. So this is the, is it upper or lower? This is the lower house, House of Commons by British standards, or Dewan Rakyat. Who are the members here? We call members of parliament. So parliamentarians or members of parliament. MP is the word that we'll use outside. Then there's Dewan Negara, which are senators. So the senators are the ones who are in Dewan Negara. Senators are appointed. So elected through general elections and appointed by the king or the sultans. Right? How many are there? There are 222 in the Dewan Rakyat and 82 in the Dewan Negara. Okay, so the executive, so these are the people who actually told you run the country. Under the federal constitution, the Agong is the head, yeah, and then is followed by the cabinet and ministers. Yeah? So who's the head of the actual running executive? The Prime Minister. Yes, the executive governs the country according to the framework of the constitution, the laws passed by government. So each thing actually to do with whatever it is of a life of a country has some law about it. And the one who carries out what those laws say are the executive. So even like say for trade, there's a Trade Act. Yeah. So anything that you can think about, there's some act, ACT Act, which is a law, which is a legislation. Okay? So the executive carries this out. Elected representatives charged with the task of administration. So that's what the executive does. Elected through general elections, I mentioned. Yeah. Okay. So the organ of government are responsible for protecting. The judiciary. So this is the other one. It's the organ of the government responsible for protecting and securing individuals' fundamental liberties enshrined in the Constitution. So I told you, look at the Constitution, you're going to have a look. There are various liberties. That means things that people in a country have to be given or promised of the country, and these are the things that are important. So from following this, the judges are appointed to. What do the judges do, you think? So judges interpret and apply the laws pronounced by the legislative government, branch of the government. So the legislature, the legislative, the members of parliament make the laws, which then the judges under the judiciary have to carry out in terms of interpreting the laws and applying it for different cases, issues, whatever comes up from time to time. So this used to be the court in Kuala Lumpur, the main court. This is Bangunan Sulaiman. It's downtown KL. And the high courts are here too, also, some of them. Magistrates courts are here. Now this is the Palace of Justice in Putrajaya, both of these. So that's where now all the higher courts are, which is the Supreme Court, the, sorry, we don't have Supreme Court, the Federal Court, the Court of Appeal, high courts are here. And this is in Putrajaya. Okay, so now the court system. So this is another thing that we will have to look at. So law or the practice of law and the courts are generally broken into this civil and criminal law. Yeah. So civil is usually private issues between two people, and usually the punishment of fine, compensation are usually in terms of these kind of things: contract, negligence, breach of trust, copyright, defamation. Yeah. So what is the punishment for civil? Usually it's a fine or some sort of compensation. So what does it mean? Money, or you do something, you create this or you give them that or whatever. But criminal law is of public interest to the general public. Yeah? Punishment of imprisonment and also possibly fines. Yeah? What we didn't, of course, includes also fines. So often you'll have some wrongdoing, fine of 5,000 and 2 years jail, or 50,000 and 20 years jail, whatever, imprisonment. So that's how it goes. Now, the interesting thing about criminal law here, or private law, civil law, somebody has to take some action against another person. Whereas here in criminal law, if two people have a dispute, even if they don't want to do anything to each other, the government has a right and actually a duty to do something about it. A simple example would be like, say, here, you insult me or I insult someone. So I can decide to either take a case of slander or libel against that person or not. But whereas this one, say if you slapped me or hit me, of course slap is very small. Let's say you beat me up and punch me up until I'm bleeding, and you are my friend, I can say, it's okay. I don't want to take it up with you, or I don't want to take it to the police. But the police can see this as a criminal act, one person hurting another person, which is not allowed by law. So then the government acts on behalf of the public to maintain order. Here now we're coming to ways in which these cases, different types of cases, are referred to. So usually in civil cases, you have Ali versus Raju, that means any name versus somebody else. But whereas in the criminal law, it's PP versus a named person, Ahmad, or DPP versus somebody. So what are PP and DPP? So they are public prosecutor or deputy public prosecutor. That means these are the lawyers that work for the government, and they charge. Who gives them the authority to go? It will be further up, which is called the Attorney General. So maybe you might have heard Attorney General's Chambers, AGC, or the AG. That's the Attorney General Chambers, it's Deputy Public Prosecutor. So to get these terms again straight, so in a civil proceeding, we have specific names or terms used for different people. So a person has suffered loss, person who brings the claim. This person is usually the first person mentioned in, this is a way that how some of the cases are named also. And this is for person who causes the loss, who caused the loss of being sued. That means, so what are the terms used for this? Anybody knows? The one who brings a claim or a case against somebody else. That person is called plaintiff. Yeah, and then this person is called the one who has supposedly caused some harm. We call them a defendant. So this is the other side of it, right? Okay, so this is the whole system that I told you that we have. And actually the rest of it also, I'm not going to read too much because it's like kind of stuff that you got to read more carefully, but I'll just highlight the point. But here, so this is a specific hierarchy. Earlier we said the decision, that means a ruling of a federal court, is binding. That means everyone else has to follow that if they want to decide on how to apply that one particular law that has come up. Yeah? So another instance, if this is the court that makes the decision, whatever they decide, then everybody else has to follow. But this court doesn't have to follow. They can interpret how this court has done or said about a certain thing. You follow how it goes? Yeah. So if a high court makes a decision, sessions court have to follow, but the court of appeal may change that, or overturn it, or refine it in some way. Yeah. Now this way in which it is split is actually historical in a different way. First there was Malaya, we were formed, which is what we know as the Peninsular Malaysia. Then Sabah and Sarawak joined us, so 1957, 1963. But when Sabah and Sarawak joined, they said, we want some autonomy, some freedom to decide for things for ourselves. So they created this court and they recognized as a court for these two states. But if you notice, the rest of the system is very much the same. And of course, then you have the Sharia court, juvenile court, etc. What many of you may not know is also there is a Penghulu's court. Penghulu is the village headman, if you don't know. Huh? So It's a Malaysian kind of system of our culture, our country, and this is where it becomes a bit complicated. So what do the Pengurus Court do? So of course the village headman is the one who decides or presides over it. Who gives them the authority? The state government gives them the authority. And the disputes are usually for small issues, as you see. Now the magistrate's court is, if you want, you're going this way. Huh? Yeah. So this, you have first class magistrate's court and second class magistrate's court. What are some of the differences you need to observe here about the degree of severity of the crime and the punishment? So that means if there is a crime which says in the law, it says, or the fine is 26,000, so it cannot be judged here. 4,000, so it cannot be judged here, it has to go here. Here, if it's 26,000, it has to be pushed to the higher court. And so that's how it works. You get it? Yeah. So basically, you want 3,001 and above goes here. Okay. What kind? Most of it seems to be the same. Again, what is the difference in terms of the severity, how severe or how big the punishment or the crime is, and the type of punishment involved? Where do we see this? In the acts. A lot of the laws that were written up, they will say up to a maximum of 20,000 fine and 3 years prison, something like that. So depending on that, it will fall under whichever. Yeah. Sessions court, you notice that what is one of the differences? Already the amount is higher. So yeah, criminal jurisdiction and civil jurisdiction. What does it mean? Remember civil law, criminal law? Okay, so it refers to that. Some cases of civil jurisdiction, civil laws, or civil suits, cases come up, can also go up to more than that, especially if you talk about defamation. Sometimes the suits are up to $1 million, $1 million ringgit or more. Huh? Juvenile court is there too, and this is for the younger people. Good to know, but you know, it's not really applicable to media law per se, but just to know how our system works. Part of our work as journalists or media personalities, media industries, is to know how these systems work. Sometimes you may be covering it, sometimes you may be making comments about something that's happening to somebody or other. In Malaysia, we have the Sharia court. It is not at the same level as the other, which is under civil jurisdiction, but it can and does cover certain areas regarding Muslim law. So that means who will it affect? It will only affect those who are Muslims. Areas that it covers are such things. Yeah? High court, okay, so again to point out, we are going higher and higher. We started at the Penghulu, Magistrate, Session, High Court. So original jurisdiction, appellate jurisdiction. So what's this? Nothing to do with apples here. So original, that means a case comes to them, someone has done something wrong, either civil or otherwise, and they decide on something. Here is some of the other lower courts. Now, which are the lower courts? Do you remember? We have magistrates court and sessions court. Yeah. So if some of them decided something and then there's an appeal from that, it comes to this high court. Yeah. So here's from magistrates and session courts. And appeals should be more than 10,000. And these are other kinds of things that this court looks at. So High Court also has what they call a supervisory jurisdiction. Supervise all subordinate courts. Yeah. How is this? That means they can actually say or give guidelines on how things are done. Referral refer to points of law arising from the appeal or the decision of the federal court if it feels that it is in the public interest. So also can say something about that. Court of Appeal, again, next level after High Courts, higher. Appeals from the higher court, which originated from the higher court, as well as appeals from the high court, which originated from the subordinate courts, except for the following. So then there are exceptions to it. What this means is sometimes it goes from high court to Court of Appeal. Sometimes it may go from a lower court straight to Court of Appeals. Yeah. So then these are the parameters within which we work. And now we're talking about the highest level of court in the country. Original jurisdiction, that means actually on their own for themselves, a case can go direct to the federal court, and that will become something that they will decide on, think about and decide on. Appellate, again, appeals for appeals. So any lower courts can bring up to that, yeah, and mainly from Court of Appeal and High Court. Okay, so referral, same kind of thing, something that comes to them on referral, and supervisory jurisdiction, where you oversee or look at what's happening in the other courts also. All right, so that's very much what we need to do, and you need to remember some of these. So look over again, and the article again by Farid Tribe on media law would be a good guide, and there will be a few other articles that I'll be putting on to help you understand the Malaysian legal system.